Your first concept in understanding Shakespeare is fairly basic. We are talking about the exposition of the play. Act 1 focuses on the exposition. That is the introduction of setting, characters, and initial incidents which begin the conflicts. If you want more information about the dramatic plot structure that Shakespeare used, you probably learned it last year, but it's also available on the website. Ian, you had a question.
Yeah, just like introducing the exposition is, it's sort of confusing with Taming the Shrew because they have the whole induction scene.
Correct. Taming of the Shrew is different because the induction is almost like a prologue or a preamble to the regular play. But what I would do is consider the induction just sort of a throwaway little bit. If you read the criticism in the Oxford School of Shakespeare, they'll explain to you that some critics find the induction a little bit sloppy because it's never completed. That story is not completed elsewhere in the play. They pop back into those characters for a moment, but then Shakespeare doesn't really do much with them. Since it's such an incomplete portion of the play, I would treat it as fairly dispensable. Kind of funny. It's very amusing. And there are definitely some gender issues going on in that one. But for the most part, it's fairly dispensable. So focus on the Act 1, beginning with, gosh, what city are we in? What city are we in? Taming of the Shrew? I'm sorry? Padua. Yes, Padua. Jeez. Sorry, 6 plays, multiple cities. Padua. Focus on the conflicts that begin there. All right, conflicts in Shakespeare. So conflicts, of course, in literature, you know person versus person, person versus society, and so on. But when critics discuss conflicts in Shakespeare, they look at how the conflicts seem to focus on trends. And Shakespeare was, as I've said many times, well-versed in his classics. He was well-versed in Aristotle, importantly. He knew Aristotle's theory on tragedy. He also knew Aristotle's theory on ethics and borrowed from them when he talked about conflict. And we can consider that conflict in Shakespeare's comedies occur when balance is not present, when the world has lost a certain amount of balance. Balance was very important for Aristotle in philosophy, because Aristotle conceived of ethics, of morality, as something that he calls the golden mean. What do I mean by mean? Average, very good. Thank you. It's a mathematical term. So when we talk about the golden mean, we're talking about the average or balance between two extremes. Simple exercise. If you ever have the chance to study Aristotle in college, you should, because he's a very elegant writer and some very interesting yet relatively easy to grasp philosophy. Courage, according to Aristotle, is a virtue. It is a virtue because it is the golden mean between two extremes. Do you have an idea what those two extremes might be? What would be an excess of courage? Arrogance or foolhardiness, right? Just, Sarah, you said jumping off a cliff? That's excellent. Right. People who jump off a cliff for no, hey, look, I can fly, right? That's just courage to such an extreme that it's out of balance. It's too much. What's courage deficiency on the other side? Crying in a corner and sitting in your house. Coward. Yes, that's somewhat agoraphobia, but right. Cowardice. Cowardice is the deficiency of courage. Foolhardiness is the excess of courage. Courage is a virtue because it's balanced right between the two. So Aristotle's concept of the golden mean was definitely present in Shakespeare's head when he's talking about conflicts, because there's something that's out of balance. We'll specify that in a moment. But the point is that the conflict ensues when people attempt to restore balance. Measure for measure. What seems to be happening in excess that is causing conflicts? What's just out of control? The law. The king is overly cruel, unnecessarily strict. Law is too strict and unforgiving. Taylor. Okay. Okay. Sorry. what is in Twelfth Night? In Twelfth Night, what is Olivia feeling an excess of, an unhealthy excess of? Grief for her dead brother. What does Shylock feel an unhealthy excess of? I'm sorry? Hatred and greed. In understanding how Aristotle emerges into Shakespeare, and understanding how Shakespeare looks at this whole balance issue, critics have identified two sides, two extremes that must be balanced and are often out of balance. The first one is the Apollonian, of course, named after the god Apollo. So, you have the Apollonian set of ideas. These ideas are considered Apollonian in literary criticism. Rationality, thinking, structure, harmony, community, everything in its ordered place. Everything very clear, everything very reasonable, everything very supported. And down there at the bottom, they consider that to be the physical arts like sculpture and painting, to be very rational endeavors. You're using sight, touch to understand dimension, form. This is one side of our existence, one side of a community. The next, the opposite, is called Dionysian, or Dionysian, depending upon your pronunciation. Apollo, you know, of course, was the god of morality, god of light, god of healing. Dionysus is god of what? Wine and parties. Very good. He's also god of the harvest. He's Dionysus, and the Dionysian side of these experiences includes emotion, feeling, chaos, selfishness, instinct, and intuition. Being individual, not necessarily being part of the group. And lastly, and interestingly, critics and philosophers have believed this is more closely aligned with music, which they find to be an extraordinarily emotional art form. Who is wallowing in this side of things excessively, and Shakespeare highlights that by making this character listen to music. Not Sly so much. Sly's just drunk. Sly's drunk. One of the plays introduces with a character wallowing on the Dionysian side of things and listening to and talking about music at length. Twelfth Night. Thank you very much. Duke Orsino begins the play with a speech about how wonderful music is. And Ashley, what is Duke Orsino's problem at that moment? And Olivia won't return his love, and he's very heartsick, and he's very romantic, and he's crying, and he's upset, and he's very poetic, and he's listening to music. He's a big baby. Very good. But what's happening? People could say that he's experiencing an internal conflict because he is out of balance. He is too much over on these sides of things. So is Olivia in that play. She is also heartsick, but she is grieving for her lost brother. Both of them are imbalanced at the beginning of the play. Katerina, in Taming of the Shrew, is definitely imbalanced over here, but instead of being romantic and weepy and a big baby, she's a shrew. She's a witch. She throws things at people. She screams at them. She beats them about the head just for looking at her wrong. She is also